So please take your seat. I would like the speakers of the last session to be here. Mikael and Oded and Elvin and Karin. And for the rest of you, to get you a little bit involved into the discussion, you need your smartphone or tablet or laptop to and go to menti.com. This is a short panel discussion involving you on the topic of the future of bio-based materials. And feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask questions to the panel. I have a few questions that I will ask you to think about. Looking at the future of biomaterials, of forest-based materials, one question is, of course, how is forest-based materials perceived by, well, in general, the general public? Is it, for many of us, it's natural to think of it as something good. On the other hand, at least when I grew up, wood, especially from tropical forest, was something really bad. We were killing the lungs of the earth by using forest. Still, you see a lot of signs on that asks you to save paper, save trees, and save the planet. So the first question I would like you to think about, and the panel to comment, the perception of forest-based materials. Is it perceived as something good? Is it perceived as something bad? The vegan movement saying meat is murder. Maybe there's someone saying wood is murder. But starting from, is there someone who would like to take a first comment? Maybe not answer the question, but the comment on the perception of wood. Is it something good or something bad? Would I like to start?
So I just wanted to make a comment on vegans' comment that cutting wood is murder. I really don't know if it is true or not, but we tend to think that as biologists, that the bigger the genome, the more developed is the organism. So if you look at the bacteria that have a relatively small genome with very few nucleotides, when you go to something more developed like yeast, and then maybe to insects and maybe to mammals, the genome side is growing and up to a point where you have a human being that is fairly large. But I don't know how many people know that certain plants, like lettuce, for example, has a genome that is about 10 times bigger than human. So maybe lettuce is a more intelligent way of living. And if you think of it, lettuce typically finds itself in the world between the hamburger and the bun. So it's not such a bad place to be.
Thank you. Elvin, you were talking about the perception of material as a natural material, and generally I think you mentioned it as a good property. Is there also, in your work, do you also see, is there a backside, a negative side with working with biomaterials? Not maybe because it's murder, but because it has some bad perceptions as well, or?
Yeah, I think I cannot really give a very, concrete answer for whether they are perceived as good or bad. So as I said, it's very context dependent and very much to whom you ask exactly. But the only thing that I can say, which is very good, that we can really fine-tune them. We can play with their qualities. So this is really, so actually it doesn't matter what we think, but the important is we can create what we want to elicit. So this is the most important thing. So I can't really give, because in my studies I found many things. It depends on culture. I made studies that I compared Dutch, Chinese, Turkish, and their perception of plastics, metal, and this kind of things. And you can really get some amazing results that they really think differently in culture, different cultures. But I also very much use this motto as materials have no meanings. They just get meanings. So this is important that we keep this in mind and we work for this future meanings that what we want to really create, I would say. Yeah.
Thanks. Mikael?
Yeah, I've been involved in the standardization, the European standardization of what is bio-based. What is bio-based materials? How do we define them? And the initiative to the standardization came from Italy, Spain, and France. And they proposed that everything that needs more than 8 years to regrow is not bio-based. So, I mean, Swedish trees and Finnish trees, they need 80 to 120 years before we harvest them. They are not renewable, according to them. But, I mean, we had a big fight, and now they are. But it shows a bit of the attitude. But one also has to remember that in Southern Europe, the agro side is very strong. And they want us to use agrofibers instead of wood fibers. And I mean, there is a lot of people that I've been called tree killer, or how can you work with destroying the forests? And it's, I mean, for us, the forest is safe. There is no danger except in Stockholm where we have these ticks. But I mean, otherwise the forest is safe. And we used to like to use wood in the interior. We have wood furniture. We use paper instead of plastic. But I mean, if you get down to already in Germany, it changes. So it's, but it's, I mean, it's our fields. We are cultivating forest. No one plants trees in order to make paper. You do it in order to get the timber. And then it's the thinnings and the leftovers that we use for paper. And it's, but no one knows. And we don't teach people, we don't teach our students, we don't teach our children on why we have forests, how we are treating them. We just take it for granted. So I think we have a big mission to do already at home.
Okay. Thank you. Question from the front row. Next is someone in the back then.
Yeah, because I just wanted to ask as well, based on the kind of perception of this, and also, Elvin, you were talking about, like, you know, you show products and like how people respond to it, but kind of similar to what you are discussing now, if we also showcase the process, maybe the feeling of the product is completely different. So also already when you're saying, like, if I show a chair or something that is like, we don't even know what it is, right? The feeling is already different. So I wonder how you guys think about, and how we should exhibit as well the process, and how important that is of, you know, the perception of all of this, what we are doing.
That's a very good question. Actually, I wish I could keep that slide about this, because we had a very recent study on material narratives. So the effect of narratives on people's experience of materials. So how we really present a material, what is the story behind it, and what is the process really affects how they really assess the material. So like this Shaharar's example, so it's a speculative project, it's mining, and her story, actually it's not an end result there, it's not a product that she presents, it's the story, what she thinks about the material and how she mines the material in the future. And it really affects us. We are really immediately, wow, this wow effect, very much affected. And actually we collected around 100 cases, material design cases, and we look at their stories. We analyze the stories and selected the most effective ones and how they built their stories. And based on that, we created a method for that, actually, to help other material designers make their stories accordingly. Maybe in another session that I could share that one, or send it maybe individually, yeah.
And maybe that also connects to what Mikael was saying. It's also the storytelling of the feedstock production in case of the forest. Maybe also there is a place for that as well.
if I may add something, I think it just reminds me simply branding, because we tend to think that forest was there before, and wood is natural, so it should be good. But we are getting older, at least me, and maybe our children are exposed to other things. And so I think what we need to do, if we believe that the forests and biomaterials are really the solution to the sustainability of our planet, is just like Nike do. Make sure that we build the brand, and if we do it right, then as we all know, people are attracted to brands, and not because of the real property, but because of wanted to be part of that.
Yeah, good. The branding, just do it, right?
Yeah. Hello? Yeah, I think it's a really good question, an interesting question as well. I think I agree with all of you. This telling the story is very important. It just reminds me about when I started to work at Processum. I used to work for 10 years in the pharmaceutical industry, and my children thought that I was making medicine. Well, I was making medicines to save people. And then I told her that we're working with wood and trees. But Mama, you can't cut down the trees. And then I was thinking, and I actually grew up with this, so I had this in my backbone. I knew about the culture of the Swedish forests and how they grow, and we don't use more than it grows, etc. But I did not. I just took for granted that she knew what I knew. So I had to learn my lesson, go back a step.
Good. So let's look at another aspect, trying to capture maybe some trends. Materials, they should be increasingly functional, be complex, be designed and so on, but they should also be renewable. And in the circular economy, they should also be recyclable. But both the aspects of renewable and recyclable will put limits to how you can design your material. So what do you think? Where's the trend taking us? What will be the important?
Well, if there is no good function, there's no reason to do it.
Good, next question.
Sorry.
I think that... I just think that those that think that it's recyclable are more slow.
The others are very important also, though. If you've got the function, you've got to go there too.
So recyclable leads over renewable here. Any comment?
I think, something that we've talked about a lot in the Fab Lab with people who are making their own things is it's about making something that is functional, that's customized to your needs, and that is not does not have inbuilt inbuilt redundancy. I mean, all these products around us, it's like they're triggered us to become addicted to them and buy a new version every year pretty much, and that's how the market is driven. And I think in housing that's slightly different, because at least we still have this idea, okay, we buy a house, maybe we live in it for the rest of our lives, or it's going to stand for 100 years. So I guess it's one of the few spheres where we don't have this thinking of okay, well, I'm just going to tear this down anyway next year, just build a new one. Right?
Not yet, anyway. Okay, so we shouldn't stay here all day. We'll hurry to the next question. And here you'll have to, or you're allowed to, write a full word down. The next big thing in forest-based materials will be. We had the charcoal, the tar, the construction wood, the pulp and paper, then what? There's an obvious answer, maybe. Nanocellulose.
I can't say anything
can't
but
say what.
sick. No, the nanocellulose is the big thing, but that's just the starting material. It's the application, it's the, I mean, what we are doing. And I think that fashion is one of the really, not fashion, but textiles is something that will be very soon a huge market. And it's the UK Environmental Agency showed that when you buy this ecological cotton bag for your grocery shopping, you have to use it 50 times without washing it in order to that it should be more sustainable than buying a paper bag each time. And if we then think how many of you have T-shirts you have used 50 times without washing, and wouldn't it be nice to have a paper T-shirt you just could leave in the paper collection instead of washing it? So I really think that what's going on in the textile side, we are learning just now how to spin the pulp fibers or even spin the nanofibers. The nano, that's the strongest materials that man ever has made is spun nanofibrils. So I think there will be some exciting things coming that way.
Yeah, you're not the only one. Clothes is on top in the voting so far here.
I think that the next thing, maybe not the first next, but next, would be taking advantage of genome editing technologies, and of course genetic engineering, and maybe we'll be able to make transgenic trees that will have a designer wood with new functionalities. For example, I mean, one of my students recently made a transgenic eucalyptus that express resilin, and we have a wood that is more that its bending modulus is much better than the regular one. But this is just the beginning. I mean, you could think of lots of things, and maybe even in the future to make trees that will introduce even sensors into the wood. The sky is the limit to what we can think, and most probably technology is only there to support what we dream.
Can I also give a...
Sure.
Maybe it's done already, so I'm not that up to date, but in our group we focus on two types of materials as a group, let's say family, Biobased and smart. And the smart technologies, of course, they're also really incredibly increasing, electroluminescent materials, OLED type of materials. And a lot is happening, of course, bio-based materials combined with these technologies. That would be maybe also one of the directions towards more interactive bio-based, wood-based materials that could illuminate light and this kind of... Oops.
Sorry. And also, what about just collaboration, right? Because actually, if we think, yeah, what is the next best thing? Like maybe it's something that maybe we have our individual kind of dreams, but also something that is kind of concocted by kind of more people from different fields together. And also I want to come back to you, Oded, because you were at the Biennale, right? And you were teamed as a scientist with an architect. So I wanted to ask you, what did you actually learn from this experience, actually, you know, working with an architect? Because it is not your dream, the end part, and it's also not the architect's dream, but actually the collaboration of that, I think, is really interesting.
So for me, it was an amazing experience because first of all, I found that at least the architects I work with are really very creative and amazing people that think quite to far distance, and I enjoyed it very much. And I can say, as a proof for that, that this didn't end in the Biennale. Later on, for example, we did another project where we took nanocellulose. I think many of you know that nanocellulose can make physical colors. And so we together created butterflies for the Israel Museum that are made of nanocellulose. And I think that it's really, people here discuss the interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary, and I think that this is a key. We have to go back and almost force our students to work in trans and interdisciplinary areas, because the academy, the regular academy, in Israel and all over the world, it's the same. You go to a department like a chemistry department, so they're all chemists, and one will do organic chemistry or polymer chemistry, and the other one will do a physical chemistry or inorganic chemistry, and even they don't talk to each other. And my role model, people like Leonardo da Vinci, who was a chemist, who was a medical doctor, he was an engineer, and some people say he was even a good artist, right? and the fact that he had so many disciplines, I think, was a very good thing. And today, if you have someone like him in the academy, he probably will not be promoted.
There is a big difference on the world we are living in and the one with Leonardo. His world was started from the 10th of a millimeter, and it went to maybe 1,000 or 10,000 kilometers. And science was trying to understand nature, explaining nature. Now we are from 10 to minus 15, which is the elementary particles, and we are up to 10 to 25 meters, which is the universe, and science has expanded enormously. So there is, I don't think there has been a Leonardo around for the last 200 years. Someone that could understand and master everything. Unfortunately. Oh, there is a Leonardo now, but he's, I think, an actor.
Okay, so that connects to the final question, which is maybe the question is what will be important to drive the development. The question to the audience here is which ones will be most important. So now we get a fingerprint of who's here and who is who's not. And I definitely missed out categories that you would like to vote for, but these are the ones you got to choose from. But anyway, to the panel, what will be important to drive disciplines or other issues that will be important to drive the development? What do you think?
Yeah, I can, because what I think, also related to the previous question, what I understood in these projects, product or something demonstrator is not always the end goal, to include creative minds in the projects. So the end goal is really collaboration, to understand each other, and sometimes maybe it's not the product, but the process really teaches us a lot. And I really saw that in the projects that designers were involved not only to passive takers of the materials, but really active makers. Then we could really get something out of it. So because they were there, so what we see usually we were talking actually during the lunch, creativity is understood in these projects very much about like a cognitive process, which is the traditional understanding of creativity, that when you sit around the table and when you put a material, designers can come up with an idea immediately. It's expected like that. But actually it's not the truth. Creativity is really in the action. Creativity is distributed. So when we discuss, and not necessarily for the end result, for the product, but when we discuss and we come together, and I think this will really drive innovation, and we will see. And my PhD student now, Bahar, is Bahar Bharati, she's developing a very nice paper about that, all this, what we understood from these projects and how design-driven material innovation went wrong so far. So why really we couldn't use this creative power of designers actually in these projects in a most efficient way. So I would say that, yeah, of course I'm from a design domain. I would say, I would say that I think all of them play a very important role. This collaborative act. Yeah.
Yeah, we just looked back in history and who has been developing and brought new materials to the market. And I mean, traditionally it was the craftsman. It was the carpenter that needed to do something, or it was the architect that wanted to have bent wood. It was not scientists that started to bend wood or develop things. It's people that had a practical problem that they needed to solve. And also when you look today on the new materials out, like the OHO, and then we saw earlier the water, it's art students from London that has developed the idea. And it's people that they are not scientists, they want to solve a problem, they develop something so that it's good enough to solve the problem, and they launch it. And we want to have perfect curves with 100 measuring points and standard deviation and have it published and before we do anything. So I think that we need the problem solver, the practical people. We need to get our materials out to the people that can put their hands on them. And that might be the designers.
I'm actually missing one column here, and that is unmet needs. I think that unmet needs are the real drivers of innovation. Because consumers, with all the respect, they consume what is there. And they not necessarily those that change things. Real unmet needs cause entrepreneurs that go to the scientists and tell them, why don't you solve the problem? And of course designers and everything in between. But the real drivers in the world are unmet needs.
Thank you. Karin, can't you say that it's the engineers?
It's the engineers. No, I actually agree with all of you, and the collaboration is key, I think, in the whole thing, and the entrepreneurs are missing. Yes.
Thank you. Final question, comment from the audience.
I'm a bit biased by the different columns you have, because you see people like decide the consumers and producers, but isn't like any means of making architecture or making products like improving human life. And I think that if we go back to that and like stop seeing people as consumers or producers, what we want to do is like reduce our footprint or like making a better world for our child. That's what I'm hoping doing every day when I have a child. And that's what drives me, and I hope that that's what drives one. I feel a bit naive like a teenager, but I feel that this kind of category is just like reproducing a model, and then in 200 years we'll say, oh shit, like wood was not the thing, it's the new oil, and then we have to find something else. Whereas I see like wood like one more layer of culture or like traditions that we create for our children that they can pick from and maybe develop new ways of seeing the world. And I'm a bit afraid when we start speaking just about a resource as a resource and we can just like utnyttja det. I don't know how to say it in English.
To exploit the resource maybe. Yeah. Thank you. So maybe that's a good ending point. I'd like to thank the panel. I'd like to thank you for your attention. And then I guess I leave the word back to Åke or to the closing speaker directly. So, thank you. And